So you guys went outside of Scotland for Series B.
Yes, yeah.
And do you think it's possible, I guess my question would be, you're still a Scottish company,
Yes.
but your funding's come from Silicon Valley, or a VC based in the Valley?
Yeah, so our A is Pentech, which is Edinburgh. Our B is mostly, well, is a combination of our A's obviously, but the lead was London, Piton, and also we've got a Silicon Valley investor called Bullpen Capital.
Okay. And your experience in convincing a Valley VC to invest in a Scottish startup,
how hard is it?
How hard is it?
It's certainly a lot harder than if you were in the Valley, without a doubt. We've had competitors through the days where it's like, wow, these guys have half the traction what we have, and they're raising 3 times as much. And that's happened to us repeatedly. And a lot of it is, really kind of personal contacts. The people who've known this guy, he's worked with one of our competitors more recently. They know them because they invested in the previous company. These guys are employees there. They're thinking they're good guys. They're strong marketing team. So it's for us to come in. You have to have twice to 3 times the amount of traction to raise the same amount of money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's open it up to the audience. David.
While I'm waiting for the microphone, not being one of the world's natural salespeople, I won't tell you that tomorrow afternoon we're running our product management session as part of the festival from 2 till 4. So if anyone is interested in taking part in that debate, and it is a debate, to this gentleman's question earlier and your replies, in this building 2 till 4 tomorrow. I think this is really neat because I think what's happening is almost full circle. Brian, your last slide that you left up there, which you weren't allowed to talk about, was lean startup myth number 1, you don't need venture capital, which I think plays very nicely to what Nigel's saying. And on your chart, under the venture capital row, the only place with a red thumbs down was Edinburgh. I'd be very interested in your take and Nigel's experience as well. There are 2 or 3 registered venture capital companies apparently interested in technology in Scotland. There is very little evidence that they are terribly active. I've been doing a lot of work, as you know, in Ireland this winter, and the Irish enterprise people have, I think, seeded something like 45 to 50 new funds in the last several years, all of which are active. If you combine that with the fact that we have an angel community here, which has very few people in it who came from a technology background. So we do have an active angel group, but a lot of those people made their money in other sectors like property and retail. And you combine that with the fact that it is so easy and fast now to get a startup in this sector going. That strikes me as being a bit of a perfect storm. What do you think can be done to correct that situation?
Is that for me, David? You're right. In Ireland, we've got, I think it's 7 seed venture capital funds. There's about 175 million euros in those funds collectively being invested in the market at the moment. But I think if you talked to a lot of early stage Irish companies, especially consumer internet, you'd still hear none of these guys get it, And I think unfortunately there's that one slide that you saw, there's about 6 more after that, and I'm not going to go back to them, but I think there's a real challenge for investors with consumer internet, and that is that there aren't real value creation milestones along the road that you can point to that kind of lead to an uptick in your valuation and really are signs of progress, if you like. to me, with consumer internet, there's almost only one real value creation milestone, and that's when you have a scalable customer acquisition strategy. Working tech, 50K, 100K gets you working tech. Product market fit, yeah, that's great, and it's really, really important that you get to product market fit. But if you've got product market fit and you don't have a scalable customer acquisition strategy, you're dead in the water. So you have this problem that investors like to kind of wait until that point, and that's not just a kind of a Scottish problem or an Irish problem. I think there is a big issue of kind of investor education there, and it's kind of really interesting. Ron Conway, who's, you probably all know who Ron Conway is, but he's a kind of a legendary Silicon Valley angel investor and one of the very earliest backers of Twitter. And he will actually quite openly say, yeah, I just don't get Twitter, right? But I do get growth, right? So what Ron Conway was investing in was the runaway metrics train that was Twitter, even though they had absolutely zero revenue. And it kind of takes time to get investors to the point where they understand that and will back that kind of thing. And it's one of the reasons, a lot of big Silicon Valley investors are struggling now and are trying to find ways to go earlier to be able to catch those businesses earlier,
So, to supplement your answer, Brian, if you've seen enough episodes of CSI, you know that one of the things that the forensic analysis people do is follow the money. And I think that to answer your question about what can be done to increase VC investing or angel investing and different kinds of views of angel investing and VC investing is follow the money that VCs get and how they put pressure on the VCs to act a certain way. We were talking yesterday in the pub about the crisis that the venture capital industry is undergoing right now. If you look at, for example, a typical angel, there's going to be specific kinds of returns that an angel is going to want. Mostly that he gets his money back before he dies, right? And some businesses have growth rates and monetization and revenue generation so far down the path that it becomes difficult to angel fund unless there is a potential for the angel to sell his equity for some gain somewhere in the middle. And you need to have investors that are willing to buy out that angel investor somewhere in the middle. And then consequently, you need to have VCs that are funded by limited partners, pension funds or whatever, that tolerate the high losses of consumer internet type businesses and understand that this is something that is a long-term play and sometimes an optionality play where you need to spread a lot of bets and then one or two or three will do well and then follow those. But the bureaucratic overhead that is put on VCs to justify each one of the investments and monitor those investments is the same regardless of the business. So you're more incentivized to go and look for things that you can justify easily to your investors than you can these sort of scary bets that they have to do. And with government money coming in, like EIF money or money coming from different local governments, supporting only a specific kind of investment in order for the VCs to get funding from them, it further puts shackles on the hands of VCs and what kind of investments they can make. So as you follow the money, you realize it's not necessarily just the number of VCs that is limited because their returns aren't what they need to be, and angels because of the time that they need their money in. It's also because the people that are giving them money is losing faith in the industry because the returns aren't coming fast enough, and two, because the risks that they need the risk model is changing, it's flipping to an optionality, and they don't understand that. So VCs are not unlocked from being able to do that kind of investment.
So one comment, and we'll take another question. I think there's another issue at work here too, which is relative to a lot of startups that you see, and I would characterize Scotland this way as well. Consumer web businesses, 50K, 100K gets you working tech, which means that anybody relatively speaking, can launch a business in a particular space. And so what you get is every available space has 15, 20, 50 competitors all trying to be the dominant player and all trying to get that CLV number to go positive. And you're taking a market of a certain size and trying to divide it by 50, it's impossible to know which one of those is going to win early on.
Yeah, and what it creates is, if you like, a huge emphasis on execution,
Right.
because there
Right.
is no IP. You know,
Right.
don't kid yourself. If you can put working tech in the market for 50 or 100K, you've got no IP to all intents and purposes.
Right.
So it's all about execution. And of course, what investors want to do is they want to hang back and,
Sure.
and observe the execution, you know, or else back teams that are proven executors.
Right. And so it's not surprising, it's a scary place for VCs, and VCs are really struggling on how you identify which of those consumer-oriented businesses is going to be the scaler before it starts to scale.
Yeah.
Right? And doubly so for angel investors, because they don't do this for a living like VCs do. So everything kind of looks interesting, but it's hard to pick up which one of those things is going to win.
And just as Carlos said, you know, it becomes about optionality, and you know, for an angel, my personal view is that any angel who's doing one or two deals is an idiot, because the odds on him picking the right one or two are extremely small. But it is tough for an angel to do 10 or 20 deals, but that's what they need to do in these type of businesses.
Yeah.
You know, they may get lucky, right? Don't get me wrong, you know, but the odds are they won't.
And Ron Conway, you know, for all intents and purposes, I would characterize him as a genius. His genius is really, he loses a lot of money, right? He loses a lot of money. A lot of his businesses fail, but he spreads his bets wide enough and is well connected enough that he's in a lot of those winners as well.
And he invests against high-level themes. You know, there are kind of themes that Ron and his group think are interesting, and they'll back 10 companies that are sort of in that thematic space.
Yeah. Let's take a question in the back.
Comment and a question for Nigel. If you look at the ecosystem we have here, it is bottom left. And I don't think that's a surprise. And I don't think that's necessarily bad. That just is the way it is, and that's probably where our niche is. And we're not the valley. The interesting thing is, where other than the valley can you do a top right? Right? I've been to a whole bunch of meetings down in the city over the last 3 years where they all sit there going, we'll never do another big one because there just isn't the bulk financing here or the vision.
Yeah, I think there's other U.S. markets like Groupon is Chicago, Foursquare is New York. So I think elsewhere in the U.S. it's possible. Here the challenge is that kind of, I think the two things is getting, it's not just follow-on funding for breakout growth. I think is always going to be challenging in the UK, and I think also there's two other things before you get to that. The first one is that, you know, really big Series A, like that 5 or 6 million, that lets you focus on growth or stop worrying about cash flow and just lets you go for it, hire 20 engineers and go for it. I know when we started, you know, we were very, very conservative with hiring engineering, which sounds crazy for a tech business, but we were like, let's see how we can get to like, you know, reasonable revenues without like really increasing our headcount. Whereas if you do a really big Series A, then you can bet big in engineering and then get that sort of early growth. I think that's one thing that that's really critical. And the second one with that is that sort of mindset that I don't really need to worry about my next round. I can just focus on going for growth, and that is hard to do. I think that's very hard to do. Well, it's very hard to do in the UK. I think you can do it in like, well, Groupon and Foursquare have shown you can do it outside the Valley, but yeah, the Valley is the best place to do it.
Brian, you mentioned there, talking about investors and VCs and angels, the key point that I took out of that was you said specifically there is an issue in investor education. And I think I agree with that. So in Scotland, a lot of angels in particular, as you say, have made their money in different ways. And I don't think there's a big understanding of the expertise. And really, they've got a lot of options to invest in. There's a lot of things coming at them, a huge amount of business plans, a lot going on. They find it difficult to make those decisions. So I guess I'd be interested in your views or anyone else in the room's views on how we bridge and how we fix that education gap. I think it's critical.
Yeah, so I think, you know, the first thing is that the reality is it's actually very, very difficult to make money investing in early stage tech, right? You know, it's venture capital returns in Europe absolutely suck over the last kind of 10 years. They also suck in the US, believe it or not. Venture capital returns are just generally crap. So, you know, the first thing is that I think from an angel perspective, tax incentives really do matter and are important. So things like the EIS and SEIS schemes are important. I think the other thing is that a great way to encourage that kind of angel investment is to create structures that enable you to use those tax reliefs, but in a more managed structure. So, for example, one of the things that we're doing in DFJ Esprit is we're going to launch an EIS co-invest fund. So angels can put money into that EIS co-invest fund, get the tax reliefs, but we make the investment bets and manage them. You know, they effectively invest alongside us in our deals. And that, firstly, it means they get exposure to a portfolio rather than exposure to one or two deals. You know, plus they get the benefits of you know, professional venture management of that portfolio. And for a lot of people, I think that's the kind of thing that will help them to make the transition, if you like. Because what you actually want is not just the guys who've made money in tech. You want the doctors and the dentists and, you know, the guys who have 50 to 100K of excess income each year that they can put into these deals. So those kind of structures help to transition them.
I agree with that, but I still worry about the level of expertise. And there's guys like Pentech who obviously have great expertise within their businesses. I don't think there are many others in Scotland, and actually it's that level of expertise and whether we can tap expertise in Silicon Valley or somewhere else. That's what I'm more interested in.
I'm going to use this opportunity to plug Seed Camp a little bit. If one of our Seed Camp events typically has the companies present, 20 companies present to an audience of investors and mentors. Those investors are angel investors that have invested in Seed Camp, but if they're also mentors, they're allowed to come as well. The point is that you see 20 companies, and the only way that you educate investors is through the relative view of one startup next to another. You see enough of them, you eventually realize the good from the bad. That's the only way. You're not going to grab a whole bunch of investors and put them in a room and lecture them on anything, right? It's only through deal flow. The more deal flow you see, the better off you are. So it's through initiatives like in London, Springboard, Seed Camp, and any of these ones that bring together startups and get them to pitch, and they're the best of the best, that you then start training the angel groups to say, oh, actually, I know such and such, I know Sam, he knows people, and that's how you bring the whole angel investor community up.
So I know there is a group that coordinates a lot of the angel activities and lobbies on behalf of the angel groups here, called Lake.
Yep.
You're familiar with?
Yep.
That it seems to me that's a perfect undertaking for a group like Lake and David Graham to organize these sorts of things if that's of interest on the angels' part. And again, you can't force them to do anything, right? You can't force them to write checks. You can't force them to learn about this stuff if they don't want to. But if there's a real interest, I think there's easy ways to raise the level of awareness about these sorts of businesses. one more question and then we'll take a break.
Good morning. I'm an entrepreneur opening companies both in England and also now in Scotland. I think there's much better infrastructure here through the Scottish Government, things like the Smart Innovation Award and other high growth teams and lots of different programs here. And that's one of the reasons I'm sitting here in Scotland and building businesses here today. The second point is that getting your 50, 100K to get your tech right, absolutely. You can get all that through innovation grants and also the Technology Strategy Board is also following on. And the point being that most of the entrepreneurs I know in the UK are not really running around the venture capital network or even angel networks. So really hunkering down, doing all the lean techs and building stuff on grant funding or big borrowed steal, family friend stuff and just trying to get stuff together, both in the social side and as well as the higher tech side. I'm personally on the cloud encryption side. But the message I'm getting here today is, as I've heard from lots of venture people I've met over the years, is go west. And the further west you go, the higher your valuation, the more funds that are clamoring to find new tech startups. So I think Scotland will remain bottom left, but it's a great place to be. I love it. Really bubbly community here, and we may see some breakaways, but I think it's going to be hard with the current infrastructure.
Can I add one point just
Yep.
before? The last few minutes has been a lot of talk about the money and where to get the money, but I have to say that there's a lot more than the money. When you talk about like looking at Scottish Enterprise and TSB for money, as a founder or someone running a startup, you're really looking for the people who have been through the wars themselves, and they're going to be pushing you to prioritize the right things at the right stage of your company. And that really requires people who understand the space and have been through it. And that's why having things like Seed Camp, they really are the magnets for startups, because it's not just about the money. We know we can get the money elsewhere, but alongside that, you're getting the proper kind of guidance, because you can get the money from the dentists and the doctors, but the dentists and the doctors having successful consultancies themselves that just work in different ways will tell you, what, in 6 months, 12 months you should be achieving this. To like a consumer mobile startup, that could be like completely backwards advice. So it's really important to balance the actual capital with people like in the CCAM network who really do understand how to do it, which is a draw if you can educate the angels on what looking at a lot of deal flow and looking what startups are like. By doing a good job here, you will also actually pull in the startups. By not doing a good job here, the startups won't want to go there. Like they will want to go where there's more than just the money.
I'll make one comment and then we'll take a quick break. You said the message maybe that you're hearing is to go west to raise money, and the further west you go, the more money there is and the higher the valuations are. All that's true in the aggregate, but I can tell you that the West Coast, Silicon Valley in particular, there's a lot of money, but they don't fund everything. The competition level there for funding is intense. The noise level in every sector is intense. And you're competing against teams to raise that money that have been through it 3, 4, 5, 6, sometimes more times. And so it is there, but the competition level is dramatically higher there. So it oftentimes can be easier to raise money faster in a smaller pond than going to Silicon Valley. It'll take you longer, particularly if you're not from there or you're not well connected there. You might get a higher valuation, but it comes at a cost as well. So